So I recently got finished watching a video by Natural Hypertrophy entitled On the Pied de Uses and the Lies Power. And it was a good video. Extremely long-winded in the French tradition, but if you have a couple of hours, it's worth watching, especially if you're, on the fence about deciding whether or not you actually want to use drugs at some point in your training career. And I like that he took an aggressive, no punches pulled approach. I mean, a lot of people kind of sugarcoat the issue and, don't really take an aggressive stance against people that are, essentially slandering natural athletes by making up a bunch of nonsense like, oh yeah, I just have better genetics than you. Oh yeah, I just work harder, just the drugs allow me to work harder. That's the only difference. Training for naturals and drug users is all the same. You're slandering and putting out misinformation to natural athletes, and that absolutely needs to be curtailed. And so I'm really glad that somebody's out there in great psychological detail, taking them to task on this. If he's sort of the bad cop, I want to be more the good cop, so to speak. I want to point out more of the actual advantages that natural athletes have over PED users with my channel, promote kind of a positive alternative vision of natural lifting, because a lot of times it gets seen as being something that is definitely lesser than drug-assisted lifting, just maybe with some kind of superior moral connotations, or maybe, superior health or something. Maybe you get less results, but you're more proud of them because you worked harder for them, or something to that effect. And I actually want, with my channel, kind of my primary goal is to push back on that and say, no, there are actual definite advantages to being natural in terms of performance. And those are primarily going to center around, tendon strength relative to overall muscular strength, and possibly, somewhat scientifically backed, and certainly backed by the feats of natural athletes that have never been replicated. I think strength to, muscular body weight ratio. And for what I'm talking about, a lot of the old time lifts required a lot more tendon strength. Not necessarily the same level of total body muscular strength that you would need to do something like, say, a 1,000-pound deadlift that you see a lot of PED using athletes do today. But if you look at Herman Gorner doing one-hand deadlifts with over 700 pounds, maybe Gorner would not have the total body strength to compete with, some of today's athletes on two-hand deadlifts, although he would certainly not be that far away. But, his tendons could hold up to anything whatsoever that, his muscles could throw at him. And that's something that I don't think enhanced athletes can really safely do. I don't think it would be safe for them to attempt to, beat Gorner's feats. Now I don't know. We haven't really seen too much in the way of enhanced athletes attempting, for example, the one-hand deadlift. As far as I know, the best that's been done is John Paul Sigmarsson doing 550, which is honestly not even that much more than what I've done. I just put up a video doing 485, so not to bash. Obviously it's super cool. Every time I do a one-hand deadlift, I imitate him and do the flex. So super cool. Love the guy. Rest in peace. Great Viking. Much respect. Not bashing, but we haven't seen that. That was like a one-off thing. It was probably the first time he'd ever tried the lift, right? He'd never practiced it. He probably, probably just like, hey, pick up a bar with one hand. He's just like, oh, okay, cool. Whereas I've been practicing it for years, right? And I'm sure, Gorner, of course, is practicing it for years. But what I'm saying is, it would probably not be safe for somebody that can lift 1,000 pounds with two hands to try to really max out and see what they can do one-handed. Probably something's going to fall off because, we know that drugs don't enhance the tendons and connective tissue to the same degree that they increase the muscles. You're going to, just build more muscle than your architecture can really support when being pushed to the limits, whereas naturals can really, really just push their bodies to the limits. You're basically, it's kind of like a stock naturally aspirated car. Does it have the same amount of horsepower as some kind of customized hot rod? No, but it's been, heavily tested, at least in theory, it's supposed to be able to be pushed, to the limits of your driving ability, right? Whereas you might be faster in a straight line in something that you just threw a big aftermarket turbocharger on, but you're going to have to be a little bit more careful about pushing it, right? So there's advantages and disadvantages. And you see, most of the, old time type lifts had some component of that, because natural athletes are inherently going to be somewhat limited in things like the back squat and the two-hand deadlift. Or even more so in the bench press. These are all lifts that require just a lot of muscle mass. And there's no competing with someone that just is able to put on more muscle mass. So, most of the ways these guys were finding to demonstrate their full strength involved kind of pushing the body a lot harder, but within the overall strength limitations. So you see a whole lot of one-hand lifts, one-hand snatches, one-hand clean and jerks, things of that nature. Another lift that stood the test of time, Rigolet's one-hand snatch of, I believe, 253 pounds, I believe, and that has stood the test of time, and it has been attempted. Giant Russian, I forget his name, attempted it and couldn't, and he's probably got 100 pounds on Rigolet. But not only did Rigolet have massive tendon strength, he also just had a compact, very, very agile, very, very quick body. And I think somebody, who's smaller, has more dense strength, because there have been some studies that seem to point out that, maybe every pound of muscle added in a natural athlete contributes more to overall strength than a pound of muscle in an enhanced athlete. I looked at the study. I'm not confident in it, because there may have been some issues in how the participants were selected, if it's even trustworthy at all, which is always a question with scientific studies. But it makes sense anecdotally. You see a lot of 200-pound guys from the old days doing things that 300-pound guys today cannot do. So there probably is something to the idea that per pound of muscle, natural athletes are going to be stronger. Not necessarily per pound of body weight, because you can get like a 5'2" guy and make him 200 pounds on steroids. But per pounds of muscle, I think natural athletes are probably going to be stronger. And that probably has something to do with what you have to do as a natural to gain that muscle. You're going to have to train for strength more, and also for being just integrated better with, architecture that is designed to support and fully use that strength. Like, again, your tendons, your ligaments, your bones, all that. I think, you're not going to get that muscle unless you can actually support and use it if you're natural. So that's definitely an advantage. And when you get somebody who has that kind of dense, superior natural strength, you've got it in a much more flexible, quick package that can just dive under a heavy weight like that and lock it out, whereas a much bigger guy, even with overall more muscular strength, can't quite pull it off. And I think you see much the same phenomenon in Saxon's bent press and two hands anyhow that cannot be equaled today. 370 overhead with one arm. I don't think anyone's ever done that in any way whatsoever. And again, Saxon's about 200 pounds of incredibly dense strength. So, he probably had the superior flexibility that would enable him to do something like that, where even maybe a guy with a lot more muscle just wouldn't be able to do it. And obviously, I don't measure up to any of these guys that I'm talking about here, but I demonstrate a lot of the lifts that they would do, and even, not being anywhere near the caliber of athlete that these old timers are, I'm still doing stuff that you don't really see even drug users doing. I've literally got shit on my channel that no one else is doing, and I'm not in any way, a genetic freak. I'm not especially strong. My max deadlift ever is 600 pounds, right? So that's not, that's not your genetic freak thing. That's like well within what, natural athletes ought to be able to do. But because I'm training in the old way that's actually better suited to natural athletes, obviously I can't compete with steroid users on the lifts that steroid users prefer, which are typically going to be, you know, very heavy two-handed lifts like the bench press and the, you know, and the deadlift, you know, or the back squat that just require an insane amount of muscle. But you don't see a whole lot of people lining up to compete with me on some of the things I do. And I think if someone tries to compete with me on, you know, no strap, hook grip, one arm deadlifts, one arm Zercher deadlifts, you know, I don't know, but I feel like steroid users could probably do arthro lifts pretty well, actually. It's not very stressful on the tendons. But so that, I mean, if drug users start trying to do arthro lifts, I'm fucked. But some of this tendon strength stuff that I do, I have a feeling we're going to see some ruptured tendons if, you know, some of these steroid users start trying to do my stuff. Now, they are stronger than me, and they might be able to get more weight off the ground than me. But if they push themselves to their limits the way that I've pushed myself to my limits, I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of injuries, okay? I mean, you notice the drug users are the first to yell bicep tear, and they're the ones that get bicep tears. I mean, these big pro bodybuilders are constantly getting injuries, and they're not even training hard. Okay, maybe they're training hard, but they're not lifting heavy weight. They're not doing feats of strength. But what they have is just massive blown up muscles, and they're not even doing anything to really train their tendons. So, I mean, if you have somebody that's, you know, massively stronger than me muscularly, because let's be real, most of these bodybuilders are physically capable of bench pressing at least 500 pounds, right? The big ones, you know, so they're massively stronger than me in terms of muscle, but they're probably weaker than me in terms of tendon strength because they never do any strength work for the tendons, right? So yeah, they're stronger than me, but if they try to beat me, there's a good chance they're going to hurt themselves. And I'm very confident that I'm not going to hurt myself doing what I do, or it won't be serious and I'll be able to fix it easily. All right, so that went a lot longer than I was expecting, and baby really wants to get down and play. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to cover. And Mr. Hypertrophy, you know, greetings from America. I'm sorry I made fun of your French accent earlier. It's just kind of an American tradition. I know it's not necessarily based on anything good. It's probably based on some wars that I actually don't think America should have got involved in the first place. I'll leave it up to the listener to decide what wars those are. But anyway, I don't mean to disrespect France. It's just kind of an American tradition to make fun of you guys. But, you know, much respect. Enjoyed your video. Thanks for watching, guys.